I've been on your side of the training as well, implementing this at my school. I wanted to also just, other than welcoming everyone, remind you that everyone is muted upon entry, even though I don't like to do that, but there's really no option with the numbers that, no other option rather with the numbers that we have here. So I'm going to share my screen right here, and what you're going to see is you should see the screen come up. But what I also want you to do is, now that I'm sharing my screen, you should see at the middle top of your screen where it says you are viewing Veda's application, probably is what it says. If you move your mouse cursor there to the middle top, you'll see the WebEx window come down, and you can open up the chat window. Okay? Because everyone's going to be muted, this is how we're going to have you ask your questions. And what I want you to do is where it says send to, you want to choose the option that says all panelists. Okay? That's going to send it to Susan, Teresa, Qadir, Harun, and Robert. They're going to either answer your question or they will interject and ask me the question so I can address it to everyone. So please don't hesitate at any time to interject with questions. That's the point here, is to get your questions answered. And obviously, as we go through, I'll pause and ask if there are any questions. And as Qadir mentioned, this session will be recorded and will be available later for you as well. Okay. We're going to have 2 sessions, one today and one tomorrow. Today we're going to be covering the gradebook, and at the most basic level, the gradebook is where we go to put in our grades, whatever those grades consist of, and our attendance. Okay. Tomorrow we'll talk about the portal and the types of things that you can do there as far as communicating with parents and students and so on. Okay. So I'm logged in now to Syracuse Academy. Okay, and I'm logged in as Jessica, and Elizabeth. I sent you messages via the chat. Qadir asked me to log in as the 2 of you today. You will be the shining examples for the rest of SANY. Okay. And then, excuse me, as we go through, I will switch to between both of those, and I will also switch to my screen, or to my gradebook rather, to demonstrate something in just a little bit. Okay. But just to give you kind of a brief overview of what we're looking at over here, on the left-hand side, we see our menu. Okay, starting with the gradebooks option, this is where we can switch to different gradebooks. The first thing I want to mention here is that for those of you that are logged in, right, you were sent your login credentials to get logged in here, and the URL to do that is for everyone. This is regardless of school. Your login is always going to be plusportals.com/SANY. Okay? And all of you will have gotten an email with a long link that you click on the first time just to set your password. Your username is just your SANY email. Okay? And then from there, I logged in, and I will log in here as Jessica. So if some of you have already logged in, you will see something that looks like this. This is the portal. We're going to talk more about this tomorrow. But what I did to access the gradebook is just in my main menu, I clicked on the gradebook over here, and that opens up the gradebook. I logged in as an admin so I can switch between teachers. That's why in the top right, I see a drop-down box. Obviously, you will not see that. You're going to just see your name listed in there. Okay. But that's how we get logged into the gradebook. We just log into the portal, we click the gradebook link, and then this is what you'll see. The other thing I want to mention here is that what you see under gradebooks, okay, that's going to be coming from the student information system. Okay? As a teacher, you don't set up your sections, you don't add your students here or remove them. All of that is done in the student information system. And this is still being worked on. So if, as a teacher, you see sections assigned to you that you're not teaching or you didn't think you were teaching, or students that the rosters don't look correct, all of that will be fixed on the admin side in the student information system. Qadir, do you want them to go to someone in particular, or because it's still being worked on, do you want them to wait until a certain day before they start sending that I'm not seeing the right gradebooks and so on?
They can tell their operation managers or building dean right now, and after that, they can submit a ticket.
Okay.
But right now, in order to expedite it, operation managers and or building deans.
Okay. So if you see that something looks amiss, you don't have the correct grade books or the correct students assigned, as Khadir said, you can reach out to your operations manager or building deans for now. I'm going to start with the most basic thing we're going to be doing in the gradebook, which is taking attendance. Okay? Now, some of you may be taking homeroom attendance. Some of you will be taking period attendance. The process is really the same, but what you're going to do if you are a homeroom teacher, and I think this is for elementary primarily, is when you click gradebooks, you're going to see this one over here, the first one listed, the one that says homeroom. Now again, not all of you might see it yet, even if you are a homeroom teacher, but this is the process you'll use to take your daily homeroom attendance. Okay. There are a few different ways to take attendance. I'm going to start with just the most basic one, which is using this built-in column over here. We see next to the students' names, we see columns for the grades, and then we see this attendance column over here. And it's split up into 3 parts, 3 columns. Okay? This first one is the office daily. This is the corrected daily attendance coming back from the office. So as a teacher, you may mark someone as absent. The office may change that to an excused absence, or they may mark the student as tardy, and you would see that listed over here. You'll also see a column for office period attendance. Okay? And again, that will only apply if you're one of the teachers that takes period attendance, but you'll see that corrected period attendance coming back from the office. And then finally, the one that's relevant to you is this one here that says class. Okay, and it's going to say class regardless of whether you're taking it in an actual section for period attendance or if you're taking it in your homeroom gradebook. The first thing to note is that you do not need to mark any students as present or present and on time. Everyone is assumed present and on time. We are marking just the exceptions. Okay? So if I right-click here, that's one of the ways that I can take attendance. I see absence or tardy. I just select one. Okay? And even though I see present here, I'm not marking students as present. Okay? This would just be to remove it if I wanted to change this from tardy back to present. Okay? So I can left-click and choose from the options, or excuse me, right-click and choose from the options, or I can left-click and cycle through. So the first click takes me to A for absent, the next click takes me to T for tardy, I click again, and that takes me to blank, which is present and on time. Okay? And just a note here, Rob, when you are responding, you don't want to respond to all panelists. You want to respond to the specific person that answered, that asked the question. Otherwise, they're not going to.
Whoops, my apologies. I'll fix that now.
No problem. Just figured I'd point it out. Thank you. So I go in and I fill in, again, just my exceptions. And once I'm done, all I need to do to submit is at the very top, I just click this button that says AT submit. And I think, Rob, you may need to mute on your end. Thanks, sir. Okay, that's it. Once I have submitted that attendance, this button changes to say unsubmit, and I see a check here where it says submitted with the date and the timestamp. So that lets me know that I have submitted my attendance. If I ever make a mistake, I mark the wrong student as absent, for example, I can unsubmit, fix it, and then submit again. If I click on my gradebooks option on the left, I see next to homeroom over here, I see this icon. This is also my indicator that I have taken my attendance specifically for homeroom here. I see this icon, the green alien child raising their hand at the desk, which as we all know is the universal symbol for I've done my attendance. So what that means is that even if I have switched to, say, my math gradebook and then I start doubting have I taken attendance, have I not taken attendance, even without switching back to my homeroom gradebook, I can click on that, look for the icon, and know that I've done that. If you're a teacher taking period attendance, you will just actually be in the particular period, AP Calculus, English, whatever it is, and you will be taking your attendance there. The process is the exact same, and you will see the icon next to it over there. Now, once the office has received your attendance, that button will change from saying unsubmit to resubmit, and instead of saying submitted, it will say received. That's your indication that the office has pulled in the attendance into the student information system. And you will get further instructions from your admin team on how to handle that, but it'll either be that don't resubmit and just inform the office and they'll fix it in the student information system, or that it's fine for you to resubmit, but you need to inform the office so that they know you have made a change. Now again, if you are an elementary homeroom teacher, it is crucial that you take that attendance in the homeroom gradebook because you're going to have the same roster for all of your classes, or at least most likely. Okay? So there are a couple of ways that you can, or a couple of things rather, excuse me, that you can do to make sure that you are taking attendance in the correct gradebook. One of them being this toggle here at the top where it says under modes attendance. And if I click that, what you're going to see is it hides this built-in attendance column, okay? But the key is that it does it only for the students, only for the gradebook that I've clicked on that. If I change to my ELA gradebook here, I'm going to see that that column still shows. So that is a gradebook specific setting. So as a homeroom teacher, what you can do is keep this attendance column showing in your homeroom gradebook and hide it in all the other ones. So that way, if you log in and you don't see that column, then that's your indicator that you're not in the homeroom gradebook. There's another way also to take care of that, which is to have it always open up in your homeroom gradebook. And I should be able to show you that a little bit later when we discuss settings. There's a question here on, for tardy students, will it show us the time they arrived on here? If as a teacher you're marking them as tardy, it won't, because you have the option of just absent or tardy. But if the office has marked them as tardy with a time, then yes, under Office Daily, you will see that time over here. Good question, Joseph. So that is the simplest way to take attendance, okay? It's not the only way to take attendance. If I click here on the left where it says attendance, I have two other options, the weekly view and seating charts. We're probably not going to get a chance to go into seating charts. Just know that you can create seating charts and also you can use those to take attendance. Okay? But I'll just click quickly here on where it says weekly view. And bring it up. This is another way I can take attendance. Okay? Even though I find most teachers don't come in here to actually submit their attendance, you're welcome to obviously if you do, just because it's another screen to bring up. But notice this is giving me the view across the entire week, and if I want to take attendance, I do it the exact same way that I do anywhere else. I right-click and choose from the options, or I left-click and go through, and you see at the top it already says unsubmit here. One of the advantages of this screen is obviously one that I'm seeing the entire week at a time, and I can use these arrow keys to move back and forth between the weeks. Okay, so if I want to look at a student's attendance history, this is one of the areas that I can do that. I also get on this screen at the bottom of each page totals for the absences and tardies that I mark on a particular day, and then here on the right, I see the totals across the entire school year. For now, you're seeing it shows from January 1st to today's date. Once you actually start taking attendance, once the school year starts, this will be the first day of the school year to today's date by default. But we can always click on this gear icon to set it to show us a different date range. Maybe I just want to see what their attendance totals are for semester 1 or quarter 2 or something like that. So I'll click done here. It's giving me a warning that attendance changes have been made but not submitted. That's okay in this case because I'm not actually submitting that, but it gives you a warning if you've made changes but have not actually submitted them. Any questions on the process of taking attendance? Okay. While I'm waiting, if there are any questions, what I'm going to do here is just clean up after myself as I go along, so Jessica doesn't get upset here that I'm messing up her gradebook. If there are no other questions on attendance, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Gradebooks here on the left, and I'm going to switch to one of my other gradebooks. So there's a question here, so blank means present. More specifically, it's present and on time. But yes, you are only marking that. So you don't need to mass enter present, right? Everybody is already marked as present and on time. You don't need to mark anyone as present. All you're marking is just the changes, the exceptions, right? Anyone who's absent, anyone who's tardy. So there is a question, do I have to unsubmit before I make changes, or can you make the changes and then click unsubmit and submit again? It doesn't really matter as long as you've submitted after you made the change. So if I put something in here and submitted, okay, and then I made the changes and then click unsubmit and submit, that's the same as clicking unsubmit first, making the changes and submitting. That order doesn't matter. Good questions. Any other questions on attendance? Okay, and as a reminder, if you are a homeroom teacher, if you're taking daily homeroom attendance, you want to make sure to do your attendance in your homeroom gradebook. And one of the ways you can make sure to do that is to hide it in the other gradebooks. But now what we want to talk about is adding columns into the gradebook. Okay? Because first thing is some of you will be doing your grades a little bit differently. So K-2, for example, uses what we call skills grading. You may refer to them as standards or indicators and so on, whereas third grade and up is going to have overall course grades. Okay? So what I'll do here in this case is I will switch to Elizabeth, as she is a fifth grade teacher. Again, you're not going to see this this option. This is just because I'm logged in as an admin. Okay? So in the top left over here where it says columns, I'm going to click this button that says add column. Okay? Now, this won't be relevant for you now, but just so you know, in subsequent years, if this is an assignment that you've given in a previous year, you can actually just say add columns from previous years. So this is your first year using this, you won't have access to that. But in subsequent years, you'll be able to say, I want to pull over my columns from a previous year. When I am adding a column, I have the option of saying I want to add it to the current gradebook only, this fifth grade math section that I'm in. I can add it to all gradebooks of the current course. This is generally for specials teacher who may teach multiple sections of the same course, okay? And it may be an assignment that's common through all of them, and I don't want to have to add it individually. So if I'm teaching 3 sections of the same course, I can just say add this to all gradebooks of the current course. I can say add this column to all of my gradebooks if it's common to all of them. And finally, I can choose selected gradebooks. And if I do that, this option becomes available, and I can select which other gradebooks I want to add it to. But what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to choose just current gradebook only. I'll put in my name, and usually the name is a short name, something along the lines of you see here, test 1, homework 2, and things like that, whereas the description is where you can add some more details about the assignment. As far as you'll see in a minute, as far as what categories are listed, right now where it says category, you see only 3 options, quiz, homework, and test. Don't worry, we're going to talk in just a minute about you being able to adjust the categories, add your own, and so on. But for now, I'm just going to use one of these default categories. I'll put in my maximum possible points, and it pre-populates with today's date, but I can click on the date picker and choose a different date if I'd like. Okay? It's already in quarter one based on when I clicked on adding a column, what marking period I was in. You'll see in a little bit later where I can switch between marking periods once the appropriate time comes. And then I have these 4 checkboxes at the bottom. Okay? Lock column is the protect me from myself button. Okay? What that means is that when a column is locked, I can't make any changes to it. Okay? I can't make change to the name, the description, the possible points, the category. I can't add scores. I can't delete scores. I can't make any changes at all. Now, why would I lock a column before, or rather as I'm adding it, before I put in scores? Maybe like this is an exam that I'm only going to give on Friday. So I know there won't be any scores until that time. I can choose to lock it from now so I don't accidentally put in columns, or scores, excuse me, in the column that were intended for a different column. Alternatively, once I've gone in and put in my scores, I can choose to lock it at that time, and that way I won't accidentally overwrite those scores with something that was intended for, scores, excuse me, that were intended for a different column. I have this option here that says add to PLUS Portals as coursework. You're going to see when we talk tomorrow about the types of things you can add to the coursework, to the portal, excuse me, and this will make more sense then. But as I'm adding a column here to the gradebook, I can also say show it on the portal as coursework for parents and students to see. And then finally, I have these 2 checks at the bottom. Count in averages when it's unchecked. That means the scores that I put in are not going to count in the overall grade and the overall average. When it is checked, they will. And where it says shared on the portals column, that means when that's checked, the parents and students will be able to see that this column exists. They'll be able to see the scores, obviously only their scores. They won't see everybody else's. The default right now is set that these are unchecked. So as a teacher, you can from the beginning go and check them both. I'm going to keep them both unchecked now just so you see what that looks like. But what this means is that most teachers will go in and add their column, put in their scores, and once they're ready to make it visible to parents and students, they'll click a button as you'll see here. So I'm going to click here where it says create column. It's added my column over here. I'm just going to click and start typing in some scores. Type in, press enter. Now, one thing you're going to notice is that the scores are in red and the possible points are in red. That's my indication that this column is not counting in the averages. Okay? I also see at the top of the column this little silhouette icon with the slash through it. That's my indication that this column is not shared on the portal with parents and students. And you can see here at the top, it says shared 0 of 1 and not counted 1 of 1. Once I've gone in and I've put in my scores and I'm ready for them to be visible, all I need to do is just click this button over here at the top, and then I'll get a message. This column will be shared on the PLUS portals and count in the students' averages. Okay? So I'm going to click continue here, and we see a few things have happened. One, these scores are no longer in red, neither are the possible points. That's my indication that this column is counting in the average. We also see now that there's averages over here. I'll describe in a minute why the averages say 0 even though we have non-zero scores. You'll see that in a minute. And at the top of this column over here, that silhouette with the slash through it, now this is in green. This is my indication that this column is now counting and is now shared, excuse me, on the portal. And we see over here in the top left under these column statistics, that's updated. I have shared columns 1 of 1, not counted 0 of 1. So there's a question here about how you handle attendance for those that are only virtual or 2 days a week. You'll get instructions from your admin regarding that. That's still being discussed on the attendance. I wanted to show you the technical standpoint of how to put that in. They'll give you some more details on how you're going to be handling attendance in that way. There's also a question on, can you change the default settings? The default, as far as those being unchecked, you can't, but as I'm adding it, I can just add those. There are some other settings that are specific to you as a teacher that you're going to be able to adjust, and we'll get into those later under settings. So there are some things that are specific to you that you'll be able to adjust. But now what we want to talk about before we move on is we've added a column here and we've put in non-zero scores, right? But the averages are showing up as 0. Why is that? So that's because we haven't set up any category weights. On the left-hand side here, I'm going to click where it says grading, and I'm going to select the option at the top here that says weighting. Okay? Now you see that these are the default categories that have been set up on the admin side: quiz, homework, and test. You don't have to use any of these if it's something that you don't use, even though you can't delete a default category. Let's say I don't give quizzes. I can just check over here under hide, and then it's not going to be visible when I go to add columns. It won't be in the drop-down box. And you'll see in a minute, we'll talk about adding new categories. But just before we do that, if I am using any of these existing categories, to change it, I can just double-click over here. I can set my weight. Now, how you set your weights is up to you. We have some people that use weights of, 0.25. Okay, you can use weights of 1s and 2s and 3s, or you can put in your weights as your expected percentages. Doesn't really matter. It's up to you. Whatever it is you put in as weights, it's going to set up those relative to each other because they're just ratios. Okay? You can also adjust your categories. So if lavender as the default color for tests offends you to your very core, everyone knows that tests are bright red, by all means you can come in here and adjust that. Okay, and you'll see visually in the gradebook that those colors show up as well so that you can identify just at a glance how many I have of each column. But I'm going to change this here to 25. Don't worry, Elizabeth, we'll change it back. Okay. But now that I've done that, it says the weight here is 25 and the calculated percentage is 100 because this is all I've put in as the category weights. Nothing else has weights yet. If I double click on homework, for example, and I set this as, we'll call it 15, okay, you see that that's put that in, and then it's giving me, based on what you've given me as the weight, these are the calculated percentages. So some teachers like to put in their weight as their expected percentage, and then when they're done, compare it to the calculated percentage column and make sure that they match. If it doesn't, then it's time to break out the calculator again. Okay? But the point here is that you don't have to. These weights don't have to add up to anything. You can put in 1s and 2s. You can put in what the expected percentage out of 100 is. You can put in 0.25 and 0.15. It's completely up to you. If I want to add a new category, if I'm using something other than what's in here, participation, lab work, whatever it is, I can click this button that says Add New Category, okay, and put in my category information. But before I do that, I get to decide which gradebooks this category is getting added to. I can choose to add it to just the current gradebook, whatever I have open. I can add it to all visible gradebooks of the current course. We'll talk about what visible means later. You can hide certain gradebooks from showing. Or I can add it to all my visible gradebooks. I use my participation category in every one of my gradebooks. I don't want to have to add it individually. I can choose all of my visible gradebooks. Okay? Again, I'm going to choose just this individual one here, so I'll have less to clean up. And I'll choose classwork here as an option and put that as 20. And we want, lime, Skittles, green as the color for classwork. Okay, and I've added that. Yeah. So again, you can add your own categories. You can adjust the existing category weights. You can hide any categories that you don't use. And If you are a teacher that doesn't use category weights, if you just go on a simple or basic point system, you can uncheck here where it says weight categories, and then it will say, do you want to not weight categories only in this grade book? Do you want to not weight categories in all of your active grade books? And in this case, I'm going to click cancel. I'll just keep it here. But if you do that, if you uncheck using category weights, then those categories are just used organizationally, and then each column that you add is going to be weighted against all of the rest of them based on the total possible points that you've given in a marking period. But I'll keep these as this, and I'm going to just say that, well, actually, I'll set something for quiz while we're at it. Okay, and click done. Okay. And then absolutely, I will get to that. It's a good question. I'll get to that. For the question on how to delete a column, I can right-click on it and choose where it says delete here. You'll see in a minute, and towards the end, I'll show you how you can delete all of the columns you can add. It's okay to be adding columns now because no parents and students are logging in yet. So you can individually delete columns as long as they're not locked, and then you'll be able to delete multiple columns at once. Okay. There was a good question here from Diane as far as how can I weigh assignments differently within the same category? So let's say I add another test column over here. Test 2. Suppose if it's an even harder test, I should make it out of 200. And from now I'll make it from the very beginning count and averages and be shared. I've made this test column out of 200 possible points, whereas the initial one that I put in is out of 100. That means within the test category, this test 2 is going to count twice as much as test 1 over here. Now, the first column that I put in, and notice, by the way, now that I've set my category weights, these averages are not 100, not zeros, whereas before they were because there was nothing assigned to the category weights. I added the scores over here in test 1 by just clicking, typing in a score, enter, type in a score, enter, and so on. Sometimes you have it where most of the students get the same grade, maybe not for a test column, but for something else. I have the option to do batch entry over here. So if I right-click where the scores would go in, the very last option is the one that says batch entry. Okay, so maybe all of the students just nailed this test. They got 200 except for 2 or 3 students. Okay, so I can do a number of different things. I can use the batch entry, but let me go in and put those that didn't get the, the student got a 110, this student got a 25, this student got an 80. Okay, and then let's say everybody else got a 190. If I right-click and I choose batch entry, I have a few different options. I can say find a score or grade of something and replace it with something else, including searching for the blanks, which I'll do in a minute. I can add a certain number of points to each score. Okay, I want to add 5 points to everyone's grade. I can increase each score by a certain percentage, or I can choose to fill the column with a certain score. Now, what's important to note is that if I choose fill column with, it will overwrite any existing scores that I've put in. It will just fill every single person's score regardless of what they have in there. As opposed to, if I've already gone in and put in scores, I can choose this first option, find a score or grade of, and I'll keep it blank in this case, and replace it with, we'll say 175. And it says, are you sure you want to replace the blanks with 175? I'll say yes in this case. And it's going to go in, and everywhere where I had it put in a score, notice I'd put in a 110 here, I'd put in a 25, and so on. It keeps those because I told it to find the blanks and replace them with this score. Now, I could have filled the column with a 175 first and then gone in and selected individual scores and typed over them. Right, I can do it either way, but I don't necessarily have to type in each score individually. I have my batch entry options to be able to do something like that quickly. Okay. There's a question on, can you use points instead of averages? Yes, that's what I mentioned a second ago under grading and weighting. If you do not use category weights, then you can just uncheck this option that says weight categories. Okay. And then it gives you the option of, do you want to not use category weights in just this gradebook or in all gradebooks? Okay, and at that point, it would just be what you may refer to as a simple or basic point system, and the categories themselves don't have any weights. Each column is just weighted according to the total points that you've given in the entire marking period. Now, we've added 2 columns here, and we've shown 2 different ways of putting in scores, just manually typing them in and using the batch entry. There's 2 other ways of putting in scores, one called quick entry and the other for those that are using Google Classroom, which I'll show in just a minute. But I will start by adding a classwork assignment here. Okay, so I've added my classwork here, and let's say my students have lined up for me alphabetically by last name because they love their teacher so much to make it easier for me as their teacher to go and grade their assignments and put them in. But maybe one day they forgot to do that. We have something in here that will help with that. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the column that I want to put in grades for, and at the top here where it says modes, I'm going to click the one that says quick entry. Okay. Now, I'm not going to use my mouse at all. I'm going strictly keyboard. So I'm going to type in a K here. It's highlighted, the student saw here, based on me typing in part of the last name. Now again, without using my mouse, I'm just going to press enter, okay, and then I'm going to type in a score. So I'll put in a 70 here, and then press enter. Okay? So now I'm going to type in a T. It's highlighted Simon based on the last name. Again, I'm going to press enter. I'm going to type in my score. Press enter. And now let me type in a G. It's highlighted Rusty, but maybe that's not the student I want. Maybe I want Anthony instead. So I'm going to type in enough of Anthony's name to highlight that. I'm going to type in an R, so green, and that's going to highlight Anthony. Again, I press enter, I type in my score, and so on. So this allows me to, even if I have papers out of order, I can just select this quick entry option and type in enough of the student's last name to select that student, then press enter and type in the score. And then that allows me to more quickly enter that. And once I'm done, I just click here where it says done. Otherwise, what I can do is, I have my papers. I can find the student in here. I can move my mouse cursor over and click in there. But it's easier to use the quick entry for that function. Okay? So when I enable quick entry, I'm just typing enough of the last name for me to highlight that student. I press enter, I type in my score, and so on. Now there's a question here. Is there a way to organize assignments by date? Absolutely. Below where we see the columns here, there's a sort button. If I click here under sort, I can sort them according to the name. I can sort them according to the date, and then I can sort them according to the category. So if I had more columns here, it would allow me to put all of the classwork assignments together and then by date within classwork, then all the homework assignments together, and so on. Okay? And I can also choose whatever order I want and then just click Sort Now to do so. So the three ways we've gone about putting in scores is manually typing them in, using the batch entry, and using the quick entry. But there's another way, relatively new to the software, and that's going to be beneficial for all of the teachers that are using Google Classroom and putting in their assessments over there and grading them over there. You have the ability to bring those into the gradebook. Okay? And I'm going to demonstrate that here. I won't do it in Elizabeth's gradebook. I'm going to switch to mine. But I'll start with just what the general process is to link the gradebook to Google Classroom. Notice in the right-hand side, the top right, okay, right beside the Help button, which that's an important point. You'll always be able to access the help from here. I can click on this button that says Classroom and then Link Accounts. Okay? What that does is it brings up a login where you will log into your Google account here. I won't actually do that, obviously, because this would be Elizabeth doing that and tying it into her Google account. But you click Classroom, you click on Link Account, you sign in with your Google account credentials, and then it just asks you permission. Do you want to allow the gradebook to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Once you authorize that, then it's going to be linked, and I will switch to my gradebook here, okay? And so this is just my test school. I'm logged in as a teacher here. Once you have linked Google Classroom to your gradebook, this is in green over here. If you click on it, you'll see it says Unlink Account. So at that point, all I've done is I have linked Google Classroom to my gradebook, just at the highest level. But then what I will do is I will individually link a Google Classroom to a specific gradebook. So where it says AP English here, the name of my course, I have this green icon over here. I hover over it. It says this gradebook is not linked to any class in Google Classroom. If I click that, it's going to pop up with all of my Google Classrooms, okay? In my test account, I only have 2 here. Obviously, you'll have as many as you have listed. You can even create a new class from here, which will just open up a new tab and allow you to create a new Google Classroom. Okay? But I'm going to choose specifically my AP English Google Classroom and click on Link, and then verify that this is correct, the link that I want to make, and I'm going to say yes. Now what I've done is I have tied specifically my AP English Google Classroom to my AP English gradebook. And then I get a message here that says, all right, some of the students were not sent invitations. One thing to know is that this Google Classroom integration doesn't just allow you to bring in columns and scores that you have added on the Google Classroom side. It also sends out invitations to the students. So if you've gone in and you've created all of your Google Classrooms, okay, and then you want to have your students join, as soon as I've linked it, then it's going to send out invitations. Now, in this case, I have most of my students, because I haven't created individual Google accounts for them, they didn't receive the invitation. 13 of them didn't. This shouldn't be an issue for you, but some of them did get that. So if you, Qadir, is your question, if I create a new Google Classroom option, if I choose that, is that what you're asking?
Yes, if you can describe what happens when you create the Google Classroom here from this screen instead of creating from Classroom itself.
Sure. So if I click, let me switch to a different gradebook here. Okay. And now this one, I'll point out here, is that if I click on this, what you're going to notice is I'm only seeing computers here. I don't have any more where I'm seeing the AP English, because I've already linked that to a classroom. And there's a question here about, do I need to create different Google Classrooms for all my math? If you're linking them individually, then yes, because you can't link one Google Classroom to multiple gradebooks, right? So if you're teaching multiple sections of Google Classroom, then yes, you'll need to create separate ones for those. But keep in mind that once you link it, it's going to send out the invitations for the students. If you see where I haven't created it over here. I don't see the correct one. And I just click on Create New Class. It's just going to open to Google Classroom, and then I can just click the plus sign here to create a new class. Okay? So it's going to list here all of my Google Classrooms that have not yet been linked to any gradebook. Okay? And if I'm not seeing one, then I just click Create New Class, and all it's going to do is open up a new tab in Google Classroom where then I can go and create that classroom there. I won't bother linking the computers class here. I will go back to AP English. Once I have made that link, we've seen in Elizabeth's gradebook how I've gone in and added columns and the different ways of putting in scores. But now that I've linked specifically my Google Classroom here, if I click the button that says Add Column, now in the top right, I see this option here that says Link Classwork. And if I click on that, I'm going to get a list of all of my classwork assignments in Google Classroom. Okay? And I can select one of them and just choose to link it and verify that that's what I want. And it's going to populate with the information from Google Classroom, the name, the description, the date, and so on. Okay? Obviously, these other things that don't come from Google Classroom, I can set it to count in the averages and be shared on the portal. But once I click Create Column, it's going to bring in that information. And if I've already gone and graded students on this particular assignment, and this is key, and return the grade to them, for those of you that are familiar with Google Classroom, when you first fill in a grade, it's going to be in draft mode until you return it to the students. So you see here, this column has been added and it's filled in. I only have 2 students in my test data with scores in there. It's filled in those grades for them. Okay. Now, if I click and try and add scores, it's going to tell you this has to come from Google Classroom, right? It's coming from over there. Let's say I added my column and I hadn't input any scores at that time. Okay, it would come in with just blanks, but at any time, I can click on this icon over here to bring in the scores. Okay, and then it just will fill it in with those coming over there. Okay. Now again, I've already filled in my scores. If you add the column before there are any grades, it's just going to add the column itself, and then you can always bring in the grades at any time. In my case, I had already added these 2 and returned those scores to the students, so it's showing up. There's a question on how you create Google Classroom. I would, if you don't mean specifically how you tie it, just generally how you create Google Classroom and so on, I recommend you talk with your relevant team there. We're going to focus here on the gradebook side and not on Google Classroom, other than just linking it. There's another question here about, do the Google Classroom rosters need to match the gradebook exactly? If you're going to be bringing in scores for them, they do. That's a question that's a little bit more specific. If you could send that over to maybe, that's a good question, Aaron. Maybe send over some of the details to Hadid or that, and then that's something we can look into. That's a little bit more detail than I want to get into here, but that's a good question. I want to get some more details on the specific circumstances. So together, collectively, those are the 4 ways to put in columns and put in scores. We've added a column manually and just manually typed in the scores. We've added the columns and done batch entry. We've added the columns and done quick entry, where we're typing in part of the student's name and then the scores. And we've brought them in from Google Classroom. Okay. Any questions on that process of putting in columns and putting in scores before we move to the skills grades for K-2? Let me switch back to Jessica here. Okay, and obviously if questions come up later, I'm happy to go back to that. But what we were looking at over there is adding in columns and calculating an overall course grade for, this is 3rd grade through 12th grade. But for K-2, you use what you may call standards grades or skills grades. And to access that, I bring up the appropriate gradebook, in this case, 1st grade English Language Arts. And at the top here, I click under Commands where it says Skills. Okay? And it's going to give me a list of all of the skills. So, recognizes sight vocabulary words, uses word attack strategies, self-monitors, etc. And I can scroll to see all of them listed here. Okay? Now, again, if what you're seeing as far as the, which skills are linked to that, if you think they don't look correct, just inform your building dean or your operations managers. But I can put in my scores here in a couple of different ways. I can right-click and choose from 4, 3, 2, 1, and A. Okay? Or I can also just click in here and manually type those in. I was typing in the right grade. So I can right-click and choose from the options. I can manually type it in. Or I can also do batch entry, just like I saw with column scores. If I right-click anywhere above where the individual scores are, here or above, I see the option that says batch entry. And what you'll see is it looks very similar to what we saw before when adding the individual columns, except it takes out the ones that don't really apply. You can't add a certain number of points to each score. You can't increase each score by a certain percentage. That doesn't really apply to this type of grading. But I can choose to find a grade of something and replace it with a different grade, including finding the blanks and replacing it with something else, or fill the column with. And remember that filling the column with will overwrite anything that you put in there. Okay? So I'm going to keep it as find me the blanks and replace them with 2s and click OK, and then verify that this is in fact what I want. So everything I've gone in and put here doesn't change, but all the rest of them get filled in with my 2s. So I can put in those scores either of those 3 ways, right-clicking and choosing from the options, just typing it in. And if you try and type in something like a 5 or something that doesn't exist, it says, nope, enter in a valid grade symbol. Or I can use my batch entry. And one thing to note is that batch entry can be used to, if as you're just experimenting in the beginning, can actually be used to clear it out. So if I choose batch entry here and I say fill column with blank, then that allows me to just change everything back to being blanks. It's going to override all of it to blanks. So those are the 3 ways of putting in your skill grades. Now what we're seeing on this screen are all of these skills associated with a particular marking period, all of the grades. But sometimes as a teacher, you want to see how they're progressing in an individual skill across marking periods. So if I click this button at the top that says Skill Report Card View, I see for recognizes sight and vocabulary words, how they did in quarter 1, quarter 2, 3, 4, and so on. Okay? And from this screen, I can also enter in scores. Okay? And if I want to move from one to the other, I just click the buttons and go. So now I'm looking at uses word attack strategies. I click to the next one and so on. And from either of these, I can click on Save as Excel. If I want to export this to Excel, I can do it from both of these screens here. Now, there's a question, and thank you for bringing that up, regarding saving. Okay? Notice that this entire time when I've been adding columns, when I've been adding scores, I haven't ever get a list of I haven't ever had to go in and press save, because every time I'm putting it in, I just type in the grade, and even there is a save and verify button here, but even if I close, it's already saved it. Okay, so I go back in and it's already saved there. The same thing applies for, I'll go back to the other gradebook. As I've been putting in scores on those individual columns, then it's saving it. You may notice, and I'll point it out when we switch back to Elizabeth's gradebook, as I'm typing in a score, it just quickly pops up, saving, save, saving, save. Okay. Any questions about the score entry, whether it's the skill grades, whether it's putting in the individual column scores? Okay, let me switch back to Elizabeth's gradebook. So there's a question here about how often do the grades sync from Google Classroom to the gradebook. They're not syncing automatically. Let me switch back to mine. Oops, hold on. Let's say I've added this column and then I went in and added scores for those students. They're not going to automatically sync, but all I need to do to bring in the scores is just at the top of the column, click on this Google Classroom icon, and then that's going to bring in any new scores since the last time I clicked on that or since I added it. Notice that when I added it for this student, I've gone in, or excuse me, for this class, I had already returned it for Jeremiah and Kendall, so it brought in those scores. So it's just a matter of clicking on that icon to bring in the scores if you've put them in. And again, I want to reiterate that it's only those scores that you have returned. There's a question here on, if you create a gradebook in Google Classroom, does it need to be set up the same way for Rediker, or does it only import the grades when I sync? So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by set it up in the same way, as far as maybe category weights, if that's what you're talking about. None of that is read from Google Classroom. Your category weights are read from here. They can't be imported from Google Classroom. I would certainly recommend you set them up the same way, just so that it doesn't show the overall grade in Google Classroom as one thing and here as something else, because this is what's going to get used to receive into the student information system and generate report cards and so on. But it won't require that, because all it's pulling in is when I go to add a new column and choose linked classwork, it's just bringing in the information for that individual column and nothing else, right? If I've already returned scores, it's filling those in, but it's just bringing in that one column. It's not bringing in every single thing from Google Classroom. Okay? And if I've already returned the scores, then if I've already returned the grades to the students in Google Classroom, as I add the column, those scores come in. If I then go and change scores or add scores to additional students, then I just click this button over here to bring in the scores again. And the question is, can you create a column in Google Classroom and bring it into the gradebook from there? If by that you mean on the Google Classroom side, you can't do a push, if you will, from Google Classroom into here. You're pulling, if you will, by clicking on Add Column and bringing that in from Google Classroom. Good questions. Any other questions on putting in columns and grades or on putting in skill grades? And just as a note here, when I'm adding columns, or adding grades, actually I'll do it on, I want you to look as I'm adding grades in the top right over here to Khadija's question before. As I type in grades, you'll see it quickly flash. Oops. I could type. you'll see in the top right, it quickly flashes saving, save, saving, save. So it's saving for me automatically. I don't need to click a save button. So there are other questions on some of the specifics. The details on Google Classroom as far as the rosters, whoever's been invited via that, and everyone, when I link this Google Classroom to or when I link this gradebook, excuse me, to a specific Google Classroom, it's going to invite all of the students based on the roster here. So if you have specific issues with rosters, then that's something I want you to share with Kadir or Kadir, whoever it is. They should share the details of some of, I'm getting questions here on some rosters are split, I think, for special education students and things like that. Rather than try and address those now, I want those details sent to you or someone who then passes it along to you, and then we can discuss that. That's a little bit more of the specifics that I want to get into now. But generally speaking, once I link a Google Classroom to a specific gradebook, every student in this roster is going to get an invitation to join that Google Classroom. And that's one of the other advantages of the Google Classroom integration, is that you don't need to manually invite the students or tell them to go to that particular link and put in the code. It handles that for you because, Kadir, correct me if I'm wrong, all of the students should already have their SANY Google ID email in Admin Plus, correct?
For existing students, yes. We got the list for Syracuse students. We are waiting for the Utica students, and I will batch import all those students with their emails either today or tomorrow.
Okay. Now, the nice thing is that even if you, meaning, let's say, out of the 24 students we had here, only 20 of them had emails in the student information system. So when I initially went to link it to the Google Classroom, 4 of them didn't get the email. If those emails are later added in, once I bring up the gradebook again, it detects that, oh, now these students have email, so I'm going to send them the invitation to the Google Classroom, which also functions if we get a new student that gets added later on in the year that wasn't there initially when we did the link. Okay. Just going to put in some scores here. It's not 180. That's too much. Okay. I'm going to talk about putting in, excuse me, some different type of grades. I'm going to click here at the top where it says name and average. Okay. And I have a few different built-in views. Just as an aside, you have the ability to create your own views. We won't get into that. That's a little bit more detail than we want to get into. But just know that that's an option. But I'm going to click here on the drop-down that says name and average and choose where it says comments and narratives. Okay? And there's 2 different types of options here. Comments, these are canned comments where I'm selecting from a pre-made list, and narratives are the ones where teachers use their own words. Okay? So I can put in comments a couple of different ways. I can right-click and choose Enter Comment, and I believe this is just the default list. It hasn't been set up yet for the specific schools, but the idea is the same. I'm going to choose an option, either double-click on it or click Select, and it puts it in. So I can right-click, choose Enter Comment, select the comment, put it in. I can also left-click in here and start typing. Okay? So if I type in work, for example, everything that matches that, takes pride in work, homework assignments not completed, and so on. Everything that matches what I typed in will show up in the list, and I can just select one and press Enter. Okay? So I can either right-click and get the entire list and choose from it, or I can type in part of it, and that includes, by the way, typing in the number. So if I know, once you get used to the list and you know which numbers you want to use, you can just type those in that way. You can also do batch entry with comments. It's not super common, but it is an option for you. And you'll notice that it looks just like we saw for skills grading. Find me a comment and replace it with a different one, or fill the entire column with a certain comment. Okay. I'm going to go in and fill in for all of the blanks. I'm going to choose aptitude in this area. And I've got comment 1 here and a comment 2. So for each individual marking period, I can put in up to 2 of these canned comments, where these are me selecting from a list, which is different than the narratives, which we'll discuss in just a minute. That's you as a teacher putting in your own comments. Okay? And again, I'm just going to choose fill the column with and keep it blank. That's just going to override all of them with blanks. So these comments here are the canned comments selecting from a list. Again, don't worry about if the list you're expecting there is not what you're, or the list you see there, excuse me, is not what you're expecting. What shows up in that list will come from the student information system. But then the column next to this here, this is for the narratives. Again, narratives is where you as a teacher put in your words for the comments. So I click on this plain paper icon. It brings up the student's information. I see the student's picture. I see their grades. I see the grades coming here from the individual columns, test 1, test 2, and so on. And I can even view narratives from other marking periods. Obviously, I haven't put in anything yet over here, but I'll see that in a minute when we switch to a different marking period. Okay? So I'm just going to type in here. Okay. I can also put in canned comments from here. I can select from the list and type them in, or I can just start typing in over here. Okay. But all I'm going to do here is I'm going to select I'm going to type in here and click Save. Now notice what it's done. Now that I've put in for this student a narrative, this icon has changed to this green one, indicating that there's something in there. There's something other than a blank. That doesn't necessarily mean I have to click on each of them, type in the narrative, and click on Save. If I type in here for this student, okay, and then click on either more students and select a different student, okay, or if I use the arrow keys to move back and forth between the students, then it's going to automatically save. So it's not saving as I type here, but as soon as I either click Save, move to a different student using the arrow keys, or move to a different student using this list here, then it automatically saves. Okay. So you see all the students that I've typed in for are showing up over here. Okay. And then, again, you can individually bring them up and delete out the narratives. You also have an option, which you're probably not going to use except for as you're playing around with this now, is if I right-click and I choose blank all narratives. But just before I do that, I'm going to switch here in the top left where it says from quarter 1, I'm going to change to quarter 2. Okay, and notice that the narratives are stored by marking period. So now, for the same students where I entered in narratives, I don't see anything. But on this narrative screen, I can see what they had in what I typed in as a teacher for the narrative in a different one. Okay, and then if I'm typing in my narrative and I just want to focus on this, I don't want to see the picture, the grade, and all the other things, I can click the double arrows here to maximize the area for putting in the narrative, and then if I want to take it back, I just click the arrows again, and it's back to the regular screen. Okay. So that's where you put in what we call the narratives, I'll switch back to quarter one here. Again, for those teachers that do it, I don't know if it's every grade level that does that, but for those that need to do it, that's the way to fill it in. And again, I'm just going to delete out all of the narratives, which is not something normally you're going to need to do, but if someone's going in and playing around with this, I'm going to right-click and choose the option that says blank all narratives to delete those. There's a question here, is there a way to enter attendance from a screen that includes the student's picture? Yes, that would be the seating charts, which just based on time, we're probably not going to have the ability to go over. There may be certain things that we don't get to. But just so you know, in the top right over here, you see a help button, and I'll mention this again at the end. If I click the help button, it opens a new tab, and it brings up my user guide over here, okay? And I can, for example, click on take attendance. How do I create a seating chart? How do I edit a seating chart? And so on, okay? So whatever it is I select, then it gives me the details here on how to do it. So yes, that would be how I can take attendance with their pictures, is using a seating chart. Good question. Any questions on putting in narratives or comments? Again, which grade levels need to do that? That will be specific to however it is that's structured. Because we have all grade levels here represented in this training, we're going over the things that show to everyone. There's a question here on, can we print class rosters? Certainly. Under reports, there's a few different options over here, including saving to Excel and so on. I will show you that a little bit later. Okay, good question. I'm going to click here where it says comments and narratives, where we got to this view, and just quickly show you a couple of the other views in here. The one that says category subtotals is just showing me, for this particular marking period, the breakdown of how the students are performing by category. So it gives me, for each category that I've used, notice I only have two columns here because I only use test and classwork, but it shows me the total points I've given in the marking period, how many each student earned, and what that is as a percentage. If I click category subtotals again and go to the one that says RC view is short for report card view. Here's where I would see all of my marking periods, quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then at the very end of the year, once I've gone in and put all of my grades, I would just click to calculate my final grade by clicking this button here that says calculate. Now, right now, it's only using quarter 1 because I don't have anything else in there. But at the end of the year, it would be factoring in all four quarters. And when I do that, it gives me a date and a timestamp of when I have calculated that grade. Okay? The other important thing is at the end of each marking period, once you've gone in and put in all of your grades, and your grades meaning whatever it is that applies to your specific one. Could be just skill grades and a narrative, could be the overall grade and comments. Again, whatever it is that's specific to your grade level, you need to submit those grades to the office so that they know that you are done with those grades and they can receive those into the student information system. And the way to do that is on the left-hand side over here, click on where it says Submit. Okay? And I see a list of all of my marking periods, okay, and they all say not ready. That doesn't mean that they're not ready to submit. That's what the process of submitting is, marking these as ready. So I'm going to click here where it says for quarter 1, I will submit. It's going to recalculate my final average, and you'll see that where it updates the date stamp, so it changed from 10/21 to 10/23, okay? And now if I click on Submit, here it's listed as ready. Again, I can go and unsubmit that if I need to make changes and then come back and submit it. I'm going to keep it submitted for now just so a little bit later I can demonstrate something here. Okay? And keep in mind that I don't have to be on this RC view to click on Submit. Anywhere that I can see that submit button, I can submit from there. I just can't do it in screens, for example, like the weekly attendance view or skills, where it has an overlay or a modal, and I can't access that. So at the end of the marking period, you need to make sure to submit your grades, and then that way the office will be able to receive them in. There's a question on, is it possible to see students' grades in other classes other than the ones that you teach? And yes, there's a couple ways to do that. We'll show you one later today, and we'll show you another one tomorrow on the portal side. Good question. Now, before we move on into some of the other items, I want to mention something that we'd alluded to before, but I haven't gone in explicitly and shown, and that's this icon at the top, this open padlock. When it's open like this column is unlocked, and I can go in and add scores just like I've seen before. However, if I click this button over here, it's going to change to a closed padlock, and now I can't put in any scores. I can for these ones, but I can't do it here. In fact, if I right-click, notice that I can't delete this column either, because when a column is locked, I can't make any changes to it, okay? I can't add or delete scores. I can't delete the column. I can't make changes to it at all. If it's a column that I've already added, if I double-click anywhere here in the top of the column, it brings up the column properties where I can change it. I can also access that via a right-click, and I can make changes to it here. Another option you have is, you saw that when we were adding columns from the beginning, I have the option to add it to multiple gradebooks, at once. But if I forgot to do that for whatever reason, if I double-click, I can choose the option that says copy column. And in fact, doing that after the fact also gives you an additional set of options, which is to copy that column into the current gradebook without scores or with scores. This current gradebook with scores is popular sometimes with teachers who want to just quickly make an assignment count double. So I'm just going to duplicate this column with the scores and copy it over, and then it's going to show here. So it's made a copy of the column. It's set it by default where it's not counting in the average or being shared on the portal, but again, it's just as simple as clicking on that to change it. But when a column is locked, again, if I double-click here, I can't bring that up because I cannot make any changes to a locked column. Of course, it's just as simple as clicking on the closed padlock, and now I can go in and make those changes. Okay? So locking the column can be beneficial. Once I've gone in and put my scores, I lock it. I make sure I don't accidentally delete the column, accidentally type in scores into that column that were intended for a different one. Now, some of you may be, as students are being moved around, some of you may be seeing students listed in here that are showing up in red, and you may be wondering, who are those students? Those are students that were withdrawn from that course. They may have been accidentally put in there, or later on, they may be students that just leave the school and are withdrawn. At the top here, under View, you could click this toggle where it says Show Inactives. It'll also tell you how many inactive students you have, and that will hide those students. Okay. You also have a couple of other toggles here. For example, I want to make the header small, and if I click on this, you'll see that it collapses the headers to show just the name and possible points, so I can see more of the students. Okay, and if I toggle that back, it takes it back to the regular mode over here. And then finally, I have this option that says thin column. If I click that, you'll see that these score columns get squished, so I can see more of my score columns without needing to scroll. You'll see a little bit later where you can control the width of columns in both the thin column mode and the standard column mode. In addition to putting in the scores, there's some information we can do here. Now, there's a couple things. How do I make it so that I can see all the students at once? That's going to depend on both the resolution of your screen, but there's a few things you can do. One is the one that I just showed you, either activating this small header or clicking here, which does the the same thing. The other thing you can do is, remember, this is in a web browser. So if I wanted to see more of the students, I can zoom out and see more of them. Now, if I zoom out, notice at the beginning, it's kind of got this gray bar at the bottom. If I zoom out, if I wanted to adjust, I just click in the button in the top right that says reload, and that just adjusts the view over here. So you can collapse the column header. You can also zoom out. Okay, and I will take it back to my regular view just to make sure that everyone can see it properly. Good question. Darius has a question here. Are scores automatically shared to the portal when they are counted towards the average and vice versa? Even though those are separate controls, when I go to add a new column, excuse me, just have to mute myself so I don't cough in your ears. I do have separate controls for here. So I can make it count in the average and not shared, although if I try and do that, it's going to give me a warning here. Because really, that could be misleading. If it's counting in the average, meaning it's part of the overall score, but they can't see the individual one, then that's misleading, or vice versa. So even though they are separate controls, and I can add them here, I'll get a warning if I try and do that. But to what we talked about before, whereas if I add the column from the beginning, this toggle here does change both. So even though they're technically separate options, clicking this button here, you see it says this column will no longer be shared on the PLUS portals and will not count in the student's average. So it switches both of them. Now these scores are in red. It's not counting in the average. And the silhouette has a slash and it's not green, meaning it's not counting. It's not being shared on the portal. I click on it again. It toggles both of them. So you do have separate controls, but it's rare that you'd want to show it, have it count in the average and not show on the portal, or vice versa. Probably the only thing I can think of offhand is that maybe it's something that you decided to not have it count as part of the grade, but you still wanted them to see it was more of a diagnostic. You may choose to have it not count in the average, but be shared on the portal. But the toggles do change both of them at the same time. Good question. All right, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on one of my students' names. Okay, so I'm going to click on a student's name, and it's going to bring up an information screen for that student where it shows the student's name, it shows the parent information, their cell number, their emails, and on the right, it shows me demographic information about that student, the gender, the birth date, the email, their ID, race, class of, emergency contact information, and so on, homeroom. And then separately, you have tabs for the parents here. And Qadir, it's saying no contact fields because they just haven't been set up on in the Gradebook Manager. So I'll show you where to fix that if you want to share more information than just the cell phone and the email. I also have these boxes at the bottom. So demographics, it's what's already here on the forefront, but I can expand the class attendance one. By default, it's showing me just the total number of tardies and the absences. If I bring it to the forefront, then it will give me each of the dates. Every time they were tardy or absent will be listed over here. Again, this is just showing what you as a teacher have marked in the gradebook. I can also see the column scores. Right now, I'm just seeing test 2, here's their score, test 2, classwork, etc. If I click the double arrows to bring that to the forefront, now I'm seeing the details, not just the name, but the name, the description, the marking period, the possible points, and score annotations, which we haven't talked about, but we will in a little bit, where I can put in comments for the students on individual assignments, not overall comments for the marking period, but on individual assessments. And then I can do the same thing here for the score analysis. If I bring it here to the forefront, it's plotting the student's performance against the class average. So you see the student here is in orange, and I can hover over any of these columns and see the details, and the class average for reasons I can't explain, is this wonderful puke green color, but you can hover over that for any of them. Now, if I wanted to switch to a different student, I don't have to close this out and then click on the next student's name. I can just use the arrow keys to move back and forth between the students, or I can type in part of a student's name and then select them from here. So there's a question on, can we see if students have health issues or IEPs? I believe that's one of the columns being, or one of the bits of information being shared or will be shared. And if a student has what's called an alert, I can switch to my screen to demonstrate that. If a student has an alert next to them, you'll see that over here, and then you can click on that, and then this is again test data. So this student is allergic to coming to school, and you'll see that listed there. I don't think that's being shared right now. That information may not have been entered in the student information system yet, but if you have any students with alerts, you'll see them next to that. The IEPs, that's something that the school may choose to put in where you'll be able to see the IEPs here and open them up in the gradebook, but that hasn't been done yet. There's a question on, is there a way to search for or view students who we don't have enrolled in our courses? Not here in the gradebook. There may be on, when we talk tomorrow on the portal side, to see a list of all of the students, but not here in the gradebook. Here in the gradebook, you're seeing only your classes and the students in those classes. And there's also some of the information on what you can view for students. You'll see some of that tomorrow when we're on the portal side. You can see some additional information from there that you don't have available here in the gradebook. Okay. So you'll see that when we talk tomorrow. Now I'm going to right-click on a student's name, and I have a few different options here. I won't go over all of them, but we'll just get to some of them. I'll start with this one here that says private memo, okay? And I'm going to bring that up. Now the key here is the word private, okay? This doesn't show up on a progress report. It doesn't show up on the portal. It doesn't go back to the student information system. It is just here for you as a teacher. Although keep in mind, if an admin can log into your gradebook, they can see that there's a private memo in there. So, you know, just keep it at least PG-13. Okay? But I can type in something here and keep my own notes for the student. I'm sure this is a very good kid, but you know, I'm just typing something in here. Once I save that, now we're going to see next to the student, I have this green circle with the M there. That's my indication that this student has a private memo, something in there that I've written. And I can always click on it and bring it back up and then type more things in here. You don't have a limit as to the amount that you're typing in here, so you can use that as, you know, a running list of notes you have for the student. And if you delete out everything that's in here and save it, then it's going to just remove that icon. That icon only shows up for students that actually have a memo put in, that have something in there. Now, if I right-click on the student again, another thing I want to highlight in this menu is the one that says show only and then the student's name. So it's going to hide all of the others. This can be beneficial when maybe I have a parent that comes by, an impromptu parent-teacher conference, and I want to show them. I don't have a progress report ready that I've already generated, which we'll show you how to do in a minute. But I want to show them just quickly how the student is doing. Obviously, I don't want them to see everyone else's grade, so I can right-click and choose show only that student. Okay, and then if I want to reverse that, I just right-click and I choose show all student. It brings back all of the students into my view over here. Now, we're going to talk about some of the reporting in just a minute, but before we do that, I want to demonstrate something over here, which is the ability to do what's called an audit report. So I'm going to put in. I can right-click on any student's average here in this Q1 average. I'm going to right-click on an average and choose the option that says Audit Report. Okay, that's going to pop up with a new tab over here, and it's going to break down for me in excruciating mathematical detail exactly how we arrived at a student's average. It tells me, are we weighting categories, and if so, what are the category weights? It gives me a list of all of the assignments that are going to count in the student's average. It would also give me a list of any assignments that are not being used to calculate in the average. For example, if they were dropped, I'll show you how to drop the lowest score in a minute, if the column itself is set to not count in the average, or if there's a blank score, if there's nothing in there. Because a blank score isn't a zero, a blank score just means that it's not factored into the grade at all. And then it breaks down for each of my categories what their score is. So the test average here, the total score is 160, 0 plus 80 plus 80. The total possible points is 500, 100 plus 200 plus 200. And then what that is as an average, 32%. And then here's the classwork, and then it combines that with each other and gives me what the overall grade is. And notice that you can print this. So if you have a parent that comes to your parent-teacher conferences, calculator in hand, you can say, don't worry about it, I've already taken care of it for you. Here's why. So you see how low the test average is, that's why the overall grade is low. So this is beneficial for you as a teacher in a number of ways. One, if I want to spot check how my grades are being calculated just to make sure that they're functioning as I expect them. Or if I see a student's grade that's a lot higher or lower than I expect, I can use the audit report for that. Now, you may not normally use this for parent-teacher conferences just because you may not be interested in the specific mathematical details. There are other reports that you can generate, just more generic progress reports, which I'll show in just a second. All right, before I get into some of the reports and the settings, I'll just cover something quickly here because I mentioned it a second ago, which is dropping the lowest score. So let's say I wanted to drop their lowest test grade. I could click here on the left where it says grading and the option that says drop scores. Okay, and I can either drop it across all of my categories or I can choose a specific one. Okay, and in this case, I'll say, because I've added 3 columns here, I'll choose the test category. And I'm going to keep this undo any previously dropped score checked. Let's say mid-marking period, I'd gone in and dropped the lowest test score to see how the averages would look like, and I kept it there. But at the end of the marking period, I want to redo it with considering all of the test grades and not drop an additional one. So I would keep this checked so it doesn't do an additional drop, and once I've done that, I see all of the scores that are dropped are in red and now have the slash through them. Okay, and obviously my grades adjust appropriately. But if I just wanted to do that and see what they would look like and then go and undo it, I click grading and drop scores, and then I can do undo previously dropped score, which just takes it back to I haven't dropped anything. That's the way I would drop it for the entire class. But if I ever needed to drop for an individual student, I have that flexibility as well. I can right-click on a score and say drop this score or drop the lowest score for Jaden. So I can do it across the entire class. I can also do it for an individual student or an individual grade, that one that I choose, right? And then I can right-click and choose undo it and include it in the average. All right, we've had some questions on reporting. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but just when you click on the left where it says reports, there's a number of reports that you can do, okay? Student reports, attendance, class, and so on. One thing I will mention here is this Save as Excel button. If I click that, it saves whatever is on my screen to Excel. So if I did that now, I would get students and their grades, the attendance column, and these 4 columns over here. So whatever is on your screen, that's what gets saved to Excel. But if I click the button that says student, I see two options here, progress report and combined progress report. Okay? Now progress report means just for this class versus combined progress report is across all of their classes. So if I click combined progress report just to see what that looks like, okay, this is showing me all of their classes where I'm teaching them. Okay? Now, I can customize what this report looks like. I won't get into the details here other than to show you that it can be customized. I can include skills and comments and narratives and so on. Okay? And I can include the final average, things like that. So you get to customize these. For example, which assignment categories do I want to use? Do I want to show missing work? And so on. Okay? So there's a number of things that you can customize. And you see at the top, I have buttons to save templates. So I might want to create one that includes the narratives. I can save it as a template that says progress report with narratives or with skills or so on. Okay? And then I choose which students I'm going to generate it for. I'll just select a few of them here. And then click in the top right where it says generate report. Okay? So it's going to generate whichever students I selected in there, and then it'll give me an overall, here's what their overall grade is across all of their courses. Again, not all of your students are in their courses right now, but then it's showing me the breakdown. All right, here's what they got for each individual assignment. Here's the category subtotals. I've kept I would probably in your case not show the grade scale because it's taking up a lot of space on here. And then from here, I can print this. I can save this as a PDF or Excel. And then I can always go back to the gradebook, closes that tab, and takes me back to the reports. Now, there was a specific question on can I generate just, presumably I got to read into that, a class roster, meaning a blank class roster. And so under class, as reports, there's the last option here that says blank spreadsheet. So reports, class, and blank spreadsheet. When I click on that, okay, you'll notice that unlike the combined progress report that had tons of different specifications that I can set, this one is just, am I printing it in portrait or landscape, and then how many header columns do I want? When I generate this, what you're going to see is that it's just a roster here with a set of students and however many column headings I decided to put in. And from here, again, I can print this. I can save it as a PDF or Excel if I wanted to add additional items in there. So this is how I can generate a blank student roster. There's other reports that are in here, list of missing work and failing work and so on. I'm not going to get into that, but don't be afraid once you've started putting in grades to run any of those reports. You're not breaking anything or changing anything. You're just running those, and then you'll have the ability to print them and save them and so on. All right, I'm going to click here on settings. We'll just briefly cover some of the items that are in here. The first thing under settings is sorting. I have a button to be able to do that from the beginning, from what I'm looking at over here, the sort button that we saw. But there's some other menus here, like for example, which header rows are going to show for me. I can choose to disable any of those. Anything in black, those are the defaults. But anything in green, those are my column statistics. If I want to see the mean, the median, the standard deviation, things like that. And this is just showing for you as a teacher in the gradebook. It's not showing for parents and students. You can check any of these to have them displayed for you. I can also click on this tab at the top where it says gradebooks, and I see a list of all of my gradebooks over here. A few things to note. This column over here where it says active, if I uncheck any of these, I'm hiding that gradebook from my view. It's not going to show up here under my my gradebooks menu. So it's no longer going to be visible. I can always bring it back at any time. That's where at the beginning, when it asks adding a new category to all of my visible gradebooks, that's what it's talking about over here. Now, normally, why would you hide a gradebook? Well, maybe you're pretending those students don't exist today, but that's not the common reason. The most common reason is if I am teaching, say, some semester 1 and semester 2 sections, I can hide my semester 2 sections once I'm in semester 1, so I don't accidentally select that, because I know I'm not going to be doing anything with that until the second half of the year. Likewise, once semester 2 hits, I can choose to hide my semester 1 sections so they're not in my way. The other column next to that, the submit status over here, this is where I can see whether I have submitted for the current marking period for each of my gradebooks, because you do need to submit for every one of your gradebooks so that the office can know that those are ready and receive those in. And this is a quick way to tell which ones you've submitted for. That's why I kept this math gradebook over here visible so that we would see that. And then finally, I've got this column here that says display as. I can change how it's being displayed, where it says 5 math and so on, the name of it. Elizabeth, in this case, is teaching multiple sections of the same math course, okay? And maybe she wants to rename them as 5A, 5B, 5C, and so on, so that she knows that this is each of these sections over here, so I don't need to know immediately, well, which one. That's the most common reason when I'm teaching multiple sections of the same course. But you could rename them to whatever you'd like, and it only affects your view. It doesn't affect what parents and students see, right? It's only for you here in the gradebook, and it syncs on the portal side as well. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean you take the opportunity to rename them bad class, good class, really not good class. But if you did, only you as the teacher would be seeing that. The parents and students would not. The only other thing you have here that I want to highlight is that if you hover over this, you see that my icon changes. So I can click and drag and move courses around to whatever order I want. If I want them to be in a particular order, I can adjust that over here. And then obviously if I make any changes, I would just click save to do that. I won't in this case, just so I have less to clean up for Elizabeth and Jessica. I'll click on the last tab that says General Settings, and there's a variety of settings in here. I won't cover all of them, but I'll cover some of the highlights. The first one is, what happens if I put in a score that's greater than the maximum possible points? I haven't done that yet. In fact, I'll do that here just to demonstrate. Let's say I put in that this student got a 210 out of 200. Notice it let me do that. So that's where teachers can put in extra credit. But as a teacher, and these are specific to your grade books, you get to control how it functions. You can decide how that works. Is it going to allow me to put in a score greater than the maximum possible points? Or do I want it to give me a warning every time that happens? Or if you're a teacher that doesn't give extra credit, because that's not how things work in life, then fine. You can just set it to do not allow, and it won't let you put in a score that's greater than the maximum possible points. I'll scroll down a little bit here. Under number of decimal places to use, this is talking about on the individual column scores. It's not talking about on the overall course grade, right, which is always calculated. The average is calculated to 2 decimal points. But if you're a teacher that likes to give scores of 92.37, then you can always change it to 2 decimal places or 1, or keep it as 0, which is the default. And again, anything you change here is just for your purposes. I'll scroll down a little bit more here, and under columns, you may have noticed that every time we add a new column by default, it's showing to the left, meaning closest to the student names, and that's deliberate, but it's not the way some other grade books operate. So if you'd prefer that it's on the far right, meaning you might have to scroll to see more of it, then you can change that behavior over here. And you can also customize the width of the columns in standard mode and in thin column mode. You can choose how wide they are. You also have the option of deciding whether you want to show all of your columns to show. Whenever I open up the gradebook, by default, it's showing me all of the columns that I added into a specific marking period. but I can choose to say only show me 10 days at a time or 7 days at a time or something like that. That'll make the gradebook load a little bit more quickly, but also some teachers like to do that so they're not having to scroll as much to see columns. I want to see just a week's worth at a time, and then I can click arrows to move back and forth between them. And then finally, the last option here that I'll discuss is the startup screen. The default is it's going to open in your last used gradebook. Whatever you last had open, whatever you were last working on, that's what it's going to come up as. But you have the option of telling it, I want to open it in a specific gradebook, and this is another way where the elementary homeroom teachers can make sure that they're doing attendance in the right place by setting it to always open in their homeroom gradebook, along with what we discussed with hiding the attendance column from everything except for the homeroom gradebook and having it always open in the homeroom gradebook. Those two combined make it far less likely that you're ever going to do attendance in the wrong place. Again, that's for the elementary gradebook. But even as, secondary, if you always wanted it to open in whenever you're teaching first period, then you can do that here as well. All right, we only have a few minutes here before we're going to wrap up. So before I discuss anything else, I want to open it up again for any questions, anything that maybe you wanted to review that we've gone over, anything that you feel wasn't addressed. Please send the comments via the chat. And also, Qadir, Rob, Haroon, if there's anything you want to interject with, please feel free to do so.
Obviously, we are changing our structure. For the last 3 years, we've used SchoolTool. And before SchoolTool, we've used Apple Sys more than 10 years. So change is difficult. There are challenges, but altogether we will overcome these challenges. So far what we have seen, and I heard from different groups of people, that Rediker is promising a lot, and we can see it in action. And as teachers, once you experience this, please send us your questions and send us your feedback. We'll truly appreciate them, and we will get back to your questions. There are some questions about Google Classroom, which we're going to discuss, and we will pass that information along to you. And then there's Mr. Carter, Mr. Shekhar. We will have some screencasts, to help you with short video clips. And tomorrow there's another session. We will cover PLUS portals. And then on Friday, if you still have some questions, we will run another session and answer your questions. So thank you, Obeida. Thank you, Teresa and Susan. And if there are no other questions, I think that's it for today. And then we will post this recording once we receive it from Obeida, and it will be on our tech resource site.
Thank you very much, Qadir. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I hope you found it beneficial. I'm going to stick around for a little bit, so if there are any other questions, I'll be happy to address those. But if you're done, by all means, you can just close the session. And thanks again for joining. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Thank you, Obeida.
Thank you. Okay. Qadir, Rob, did you say that you wanted to stick around and discuss something? And Susan, you can stop the recording. Thank you so much for your help.
Okay.